about 3 years ago, I had a client slash friend who, she's like, well, I don't really know if I need life insurance. I'm like, listen, you've got a young daughter, you're a business owner. Like we want to make sure that you have this protection in place. So she actually got the highest health rating. Fast forward 3 years, this last December, she got diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer. When I saw her policy, oh my gosh, and we got it settled and she got the money, I'm like, this is why I do what I do.
Welcome to the Beauty Talk podcast, where we feature how the best medical practitioners help their patients to look better, younger, and healthier. Now, enjoy the show, and here's your host.
Daniel Gao here. I'm the host of Beauty Talk, where we feature the top practitioners in health and beauty, both inside and out. I have Melissa Northway, who is a financial wellness advocate, award-winning author, and licensed insurance professional dedicated to helping individuals, especially women, business owners, and families, to build wealth, protect assets, and take control of their financial futures. She's the founder of several financial literacy initiatives and brings a heart-centered approach to topics like budgeting, life insurance, planned giving, and wealth preservation. Ranked in the top 20 female career agents at National Life Group and member of $1 Million Roundtable, which is the top 10% of financial and insurance agents in the country. She's the immediate past president of NABO California and mom of a teen off to college this fall, and married for 24 years with also 2 cats and a dog. So Melissa, welcome and glad to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Daniel. I'm really excited to be here with you guys today.
Yeah, so let's dive right into it. How did you first get interested in the financial industry?
So I have a young, my daughter now, as I mentioned, is going off to college. But when she was little, I got into setting up a lifestyle website, and it was really about, anything from parenting to fashion. And so kind of one of the things that I saw is the financial literacy aspect of, with women, it wasn't quite where it should be, if you will. A lot of times, women will let their partners handle the finances. And so I did that lifestyle website for about 10 years. And then I got into the financial industry about 6 years ago. And I'm all about empowering women, families, businesses with different types of wealth strategies and tax strategies. And I just love what I do. Absolutely love what I do.
Yeah, I can hear that in your voice, the passion there.
Yeah.
Now, this show is really about health and beauty inside and out, and I can't think of anything better than having, when it comes to health and beauty, than having a wonderful financial account and financial plan and all of that. So could you explain kind of in your own words, what does financial wellness really mean? And also why you think it's also important in today's world, especially for women and families?
So kind of going on your first part of your question, I do think, and they statistically, studies have shown there is a connection between one's health and one's finances. So if we're constantly stressed about how we're going to pay the bills, how are we going to put the kids through college, how are we going to put food on the table, these are real life, modern day, stresses. And so that will absolutely affect your stress and your health. And so I think I mentioned to you earlier that I had gotten a master's in nutrition when my daughter was little, really because I understand how important it is to have an understanding about health and wellness. And now I look at the wealth aspect, and I'm basically getting a master's in financial literacy. So I see there's such a connection between the two. And so, for me, when I ask my clients, what age do you want to be retired by? How much income do you want to have come through that door? I feel like by having the goal here, what their goal is, how much money they want in the door, what do they want their retirement to look like, then we backtrack. Are we on track for hitting those goals? What assets do we have? Which assets are going to produce income for us? Which assets are going to produce income for us that are going to be taxed? So I feel like my job really, Daniel, is looking at a bird's eye view of the situation, as far as their financial situation. And I hope to, by setting out these plans with my clients, I hope to alleviate some of that stress. I've had clients, cry to me, share with me that they never thought that they could ever, have this type of plan. They thought they had to be multimillionaires to be able to work with somebody like myself. And that's not the case. Like I love working with the single mom just as much as I love working with a multi-million-dollar business owner. For me, I have a soft spot for the single moms, for sure. But yeah, just to answer your question, I just think it's important to have a plan so we can reach those goals.
Okay. And life insurance, I'm sure, is a big part of that plan. So, can you explain how life insurance really plays a role in someone's overall financial plan, their legacy? So, I think some people have a certain perception about life insurance. Some
Yeah.
people, again, it's like, oh, it's really important. Other people are like, I don't think it's that important. So, could you please kind of clarify that a little bit more about what role life insurance plays?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think in people's mind, they think one, it's too expensive. They don't realize that term, which is basically renting the policy 10 years, 15, 20 years. If you're on a budget, but you have people who are dependent on you, and if you had a premature passing, what do you want that to look like for your family? It's pretty tough conversations I have with my clients. Like, I wish I had a crystal ball and I knew when this was going to happen, but we don't know. So, what do you want that to look like for your family? So, absolutely, life insurance is so essential. If you have people who are dependent on you, that's kind of like your last love letter to them, to your family, right? And loved ones. What do you want that to look like? But now, especially with our company, National Life Group, we've been around 176 years. We actually been around since Lincoln was president. Long time. We're based out in Vermont, and we have what's called the living benefit riders. So we have 5 living benefit, well, 6. California, we still need to get our fertility rider passed, us in New York. But basically, if you get sick, injured, disabled, long-term care, if you have a life triggering event, you're able to access the death benefit. So what that does, Daniel, is putting a huge umbrella of protection over you, over your business. We don't know what life's going to throw us. I wish I knew. I think we all wish we had a magic wand we could figure out what was going to happen, but we don't know. So what this is doing, if you get, a terminal illness, critical illness would be like cancer, critical injury would be like a car accident, and then our newest one is Alzheimer's rider. Which I don't know if you've had anybody affected by Alzheimer's or dementia, but it's pretty catastrophic, and not only emotionally, but financially for the families. So basically, if you get diagnosed with that, you will have access to the death benefit.
Wow. I think that's incredible. That's really illuminating, because I would have never thought that when it comes to life insurance that you can use it while you're still alive. I think it's a really big differentiating factor that people probably don't realize.
Yeah. And that's what I tell people. I'm like, listen, we don't know. So, let's get some protection in place. And then if you don't need it, great. Thank goodness we didn't need it. But if we do need it, it's there for us. So our term and then our permanent, and permanent basically means it's a forever policy. So like our long-term care chronic illness rider, that could cover like long-term care all the way through, your retirement. But it's very powerful. And I do want to kind of add that why that's so important, Daniel, in the overall picture of our planning is that if something were to happen and we don't have this insurance, how are we going to pay for, we can't work for 3 months or 6 months? Most families aren't set up and prepared to have, maybe 3 months of savings, but after that, then what, right? And so I always tell people, for pennies on the dollar, man, go grab that term insurance and get that protection in place, just in case, and again, it's much more affordable than people realize.
So what would you say are some common financial mistakes people make? And really, when would they really need your services to try and prevent those mistakes?
I think really is understanding, one, and I say this, I do a lot of webinars, and I work with women veterans and women's groups. And I always say, when I say the word money, like, what's the first word, emotion? I'm gonna ask you, Daniel. When I say the word money, what's like the first word or emotion that comes to mind?
Strong, confident, feel happy.
I love it. I love it. So those words kind of describe your relationship with money. Because when I will say that, and I'll have women, raise their hand and they're like, well, I feel anxiety, I feel, unknowns. And so I think number one, the psychology of money, understand your relationship with money. right? Like really understand how were you raised? I mean, I know women who said that in their family it was considered rude to talk about money, or only the men talked about money, a little old school, but so number one, understand your relationship with money and understand we've got to tackle that, right? If it's good, it's bad, it's ugly, it's beautiful, let's really address it. And then number two, really understand where your money's going every month. So I was given this advice, go back and check 3 months in your bank statements, see where your money's going and see if there's some holes that we can plug up and we don't want to waste that money, right? Maybe subscriptions, memberships that we're not using. And then three, really start thinking about working with somebody that you trust. I think it's very important. Why would you think that you don't need to handle it all by yourself? There are people like myself who have a lot of education and knowledge who are here to help. And kind of my role, I'm always coming from the heart. I call this heart-centered, financial support, in that I will treat you as if I would treat my family members. I think that's really important. So work with somebody you trust and appreciate their information, and then you make a plan. Number four, make a plan. What are your goals? I mean, Daniel, what are your thoughts as far as the power of visualization, visualizing your dreams? Don't you think that's
it
crucial?
is. It's critical. It's critical. I mean, in my experience, it's important to kind of keep that in front of your mindset all the time. But it's also, you keep thinking about it over and over and over again. And you start thinking, at least in my case, I start thinking about other offshoots of that. So for example, my financial goal, and I just kind of read my financial goal every single day. I read my goals every day. But then I start thinking, okay, like this is my goal, but then I have to think about how am I going to hit that goal? So now I start thinking about, okay, what are the steps I need to take so that I get there? It's not just this dream in my mind that just I'm hoping and praying for. It's like, okay, how do I get there? So that's, right. I think the visualization is important in that aspect.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've noticed that, way back when I was in college, I would say, oh, I want this, or I want to do that. And then I would take the steps to make it happen, like even I love to share the story of the first meeting I went with NAWBO, California, the first board meeting, I was the OC president. I walked in the room and I swear to you, Daniel, I was like, oh, I want to be president of California. And I was not really, first slated to be, and it just so happened that, the timing was right. They needed somebody to step up, but I did put that in the universe. And so I really think it's so important for us to put those goals out into the universe. And then, like you said, every day, be mindful, how are we going to reach those goals? And again, build a team around you. Have somebody who specializes in taxes, which we do at our firm. Somebody who specializes in setting up a financial analysis for you, which is something we do. So really be mindful of, you're not going to make those goals happen unless you really are intentional.
Okay. Thank you. That was a very good, step by step, what people can do for their financial stability. Now, kind of talking about the common mistakes people make, I'd like to also understand what are the common misconceptions people have about the services you provide. I think it's a little bit different, like mistakes versus misconceptions. So what would you say is some common misconceptions people have about your services or your, I guess, profession?
I think trust is a big issue for a lot of people. I've had people say, oh, well, my family member had their life insurance person kind of, didn't keep them up to date or didn't tell them their policy. So I think trust is a big issue for a lot of people. Who do they trust? When I did the webinar, Daniel, with the women veterans, they're like, I don't even know where to start. Where do I start? Who do I trust? And so it's really about just really going out there and being your own advocate. I'm a big believer, be your own advocate for health. Like you've got to, don't just assume, you need to question, you need to ask, you need to do your own research and then make an educated decision with your doctors. I feel like that's the same, be an advocate for your own goals and wealth and retirement. What is it that you want to accomplish? And then you build that team around you with people that you trust. So I think trust is an issue, I don't know if it's a misconception. Maybe another misconception is, it's super expensive or you need to have a lot of money in order to, work with somebody like myself. And again, I'm a big believer of, you put good things out into the universe and you help people and you be of service to people. And I feel like that is the best place you can come from. And I do feel that, you're going to have that come back to you tenfold.
Hmm.
Always come from a place of good. And so I just think that, work with somebody, like I said, somebody you trust, somebody that you can be and consider a team. I know that I've had some women tell me they feel a lot of times financial planners will talk down to them.
Mm.
Or even, you'll love this, Daniel, they'll be in situations with their husband or partner, and the financial planner only talks to the husband.
I see.
Yeah.
I
And
see.
they're like, wait a minute, I'm making decisions here too.
Yeah.
So again, I just think, there's a lot of misconception about, fees, and they have to make a certain amount of money in order to, work with somebody like myself. And I just like, just like health, be your own advocate, with your wealth.
Okay, that's great. You actually brought up one point. I'm
Mhm.
glad you did because that was actually something I want to ask.
Yeah.
Let's say that I am the average everyday person
Mhm.
and I'm thinking about hiring a financial planner, but I'm thinking, okay, do I need to make a certain amount of money before this makes sense? Should I be making a certain income? Should I have a certain amount saved before it even makes sense? Or is it something that I should be doing kind of from the beginning to have that plan? Or is it only for when I'm wealthy and I have money?
Right. I think, people ask me, when should I start? I always say, start now. And this, the power of time is pretty amazing. What we're setting up for, like our daughter, our 18-year-old, just even a little bit every month, we're putting into a plan for her. The difference between her starting at 14 versus somebody starting at 25 or 35 or 45, right? I mean, it's the power of time. But if you haven't, start now. And again, you start being mindful, where's your money going? How much do you have to start putting aside? And I always tell people, this is for your future self. One of my favorite quotes, and I'm not sure who said it, but do something today that your future self will thank you for. And that includes health, right? Like
Yeah.
we make choices every day on, we got to pay the piper somewhere.
Mhm.
So we either pay the piper by, making sure we exercise, eat well. We're not perfect. You can have the hamburger or the pizza every now and then, but, be mindful 80% of the time, right? Like we want to make good choices, because otherwise, if we don't, on the other end, we're going to be paying for that with the health issues. And
Yeah.
it's really kind of the same concept with wealth building. Like, be mindful here. Let's maybe not take that extra trip. Or if we take the trip, let's do it smart, and we borrow against our cash value life insurance policy to pay for the trip, because that money's still going to get credited.
Mhm.
So there's different strategies, and that's what I'm here for. Like, hey, what's your situation? What are your goals? Where do you want to end up? And then we make out a plan together.
Okay. And
Yeah.
when you're making these plans and you're working with your clients, how
Mhm.
do you approach risk and reward between, hey, how much should I save? How much should I invest? How much should I spend on my everyday living? Like, how do you approach that? Because you have so many different types of personalities, so many different types of clients in different situations. So what's your approach to all those unique situations?
So it's interesting, I did it kind of after a couple years in the business. I looked at who my clients were.
Mhm.
And even though I absolutely love working with women, I have a pretty 50-50, I work with men, women, families, couples, businesses. But I did see a pattern of people who had an emotional connection with what it is that life insurance does.
Mm.
So the analytical of like, well, how much is this fee and how much is this? Instead of looking kind of at the big picture of like, what is it that you want to have for your family if something were to happen? So I do find that about 80% of my clients are a little bit more emotional driven.
Mm.
And I feel like money is an emotional, right? Like I
Yeah.
said, we all have a different response or feeling towards it. So I would say the analyticals, they'll sometimes, they'll kind of get in the weeds without understanding kind of the big picture of what this is.
Mhm.
Does that kind of answer your question, or did I miss anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think in one sense it does. I guess let me ask kind of another way is
Mhm.
that if you have a client that comes to you and says that, hey, I really want to, I'm X years old right now. I really want to have a plan where I can retire wealthy, or wealthy
Mhm.
may have different connotations in their mind.
Mhm.
Basically, I want to, by the time I retire, I want to have enough money to survive on. So what should I do for my investment? Should I save? Should I invest in real estate? Should I invest in crypto? How do you approach when someone's asking you all these questions about investments? I want to save, I want to have all this money 20, 30, 40 years from now when I
Right.
retire. So how do you approach each of those individual personalities and clients, and what kind of advice would you give to each individual one of those? Like, I guess, what's your process for how you think through that with them?
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, usually I'll spend, the first meeting is just kind of a consultation. It's a conversation. What are your goals? What are your concerns? What keeps you up at night? And so I will be able to kind of see, what are the things that they're most concerned about. And then we do an analysis of their finances, right? How much do they put into their 401k? Does the company match, right? How much should they go up until the company matches? So we'll look at all the assets. We'll look at, what the returns are on all of those. And one of the things that's really important, Daniel, is we've got to look at wealth building, which I feel like a lot of people are pretty good at, but we also have to be protecting that wealth. And that's where life insurance comes in. Because if you get sick and you can't work, or even more serious, like a catastrophic, where we can't work at all, like forever,
Yeah.
quadriplegic or, paraplegic, whatever, like where's that money coming from, right? And so, I always advise people, we want to focus on wealth building, and then we also want to talk about wealth preservation. And then the third component that we specialize in is tax strategies. So our firm is really good about utilizing strategies that the ultra wealthy have been doing for a long time, and bringing that to the everyday person. If you make a high income, decent income, anything over 200, 250, we can use these strategies. For the everyday person, we want to build upon that, right? And so there's different things we can do, like, we want to make sure that we're using our HSA account, funding that. But then the other component too, Daniel, is making sure that our assets are not correlated. We want to have non-correlated assets, meaning whatever the market's doing, we want to make sure they're not doing the same thing at the same time.
Got it.
So we'll look at all those. I mean, if we're really getting in, doing the work, it will take a couple hours for us to really do a good analysis and make sure that we're on track. Which ones are going to be taxable, which are not taxable. Cash value life insurance is really one of the only assets besides a Roth IRA that income distribution comes out tax-free. And I don't think enough people think about that. 401k, you're going to be taxed pretty significantly, right? All these different accounts, we want to look at that. So again, we're taking a bird's eye view.
Okay.
Where are we saving? And you ask the question, how much? We start with what we can afford, that it's meaningful. We can afford it, but it's meaningful and going to make a difference.
Okay, that's great. Now, Melissa, I want to talk a little bit more about kind of what differentiates you from others in your industry. And I love the in your introduction, like ranked top 20 female career agents at National Life Group, $1 million Roundtable, top 10% of financial insurance agents in the country. So could you speak a little bit more to kind of what led you to be able to be in that top tier? I would imagine a lot of it comes down to how you treat your clients, and then from there, they refer you to other ones, and that's how you really grow and get your name out there. But could you talk a little bit more about how you were able to differentiate yourself and be in the top 20, the top 10%?
I appreciate that. I really do feel that it comes down to treating each client and like I would treat my family, in that, I always am going to do what's best for my client. And I think people see that, right? And I'm not here I always tell people, I'm like, listen, I hate salespeople. I don't hate salespeople, but I hate being sold to. So I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm here to listen to what it is that your goals are, and let me see how I can help you reach those goals. So I think that immediately, Daniel, like the walls go down. Okay, I can just talk freely. I don't have to worry about she's going to be trying to sell me this or that. I think that's one big thing of why I've been able to be successful in this industry so quickly. And again, I'm really coming from a place of wanting to do good, and that's actually National Life's kind of tagline, if you will, is do good. Our head of the company, Mayron, he's always talking about doing good in the community, doing good with your clients, and I take that to heart, because I do believe that what goes around comes around. So I never want to be in a position where I've ever done anything that wasn't in the best intention for the client.
Mhm.
And then also, to be honest, I think being a woman, most financial planners, majority of the planners are men. And I think being a woman a lot of times is an advantage. This is an emotional business.
Yeah,
We're talking about people passing away. We're talking about people getting sick. We're talking about people talking about their finances, which, many times they're embarrassed about. And so I think, being a woman and being able to communicate easily with me has helped me as well.
I see.
Yeah.
Now, Melissa, I'm sure that throughout your experience, you've run into some very interesting cases. So, would you mind sharing maybe just one story of a really maybe tough case that you experienced, that you went through for a client, and how you were able to get them a successful outcome in the end?
Yeah, so this is a client of mine. She's a friend. She has, said it was fine to share her story. In fact, she wants me to share her story with people just to have them understand, what this is, Daniel. And so, about 3 years ago, I had a client slash friend who, she's like, well, I don't really know if I need life insurance. I'm like, listen, you've got a young daughter. We don't know what's going to happen with the marriage. You're a business owner. Like we want to make sure that you have this protection in place. So she actually got the highest health rating of any, we have different layers of health rating, right? Depending on your, hospital visits, medications, all that good stuff. So she got elite, which is the highest health rating. And fast forward 3 years, this last December, she got diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer. Yeah, it was, not expected. The woman, she had just turned 50 and has a young daughter going through a divorce. And so what this is, that triggered the living benefit rider critical illness. So critical illness is like cancer diagnosis,
Mhm.
MS, heart attack, stroke. That triggered it, which basically meant the company came back after analyzing the medical doctor notes from her doctor, not a third party doctor, her doctor, which is really important.
Mhm.
So they came and they made her an offer, and they ended up, giving her about half of what her death benefit was.
Wow.
And it came within 10 days of analyzing the doctor's notes, and luckily it came a day before her birthday.
Oh, wow.
So she literally got a ping on her birthday,
Yeah.
and she saw she had, quite a bit of money in her account. She's like, wow,
Yeah.
and then she's like, this is what this is. I said, yeah, exactly. So she was able to pay off her, and she had purchased a home for her parents. She was able to pay that off. She was behind on payments.
Mhm.
Her 2 investment properties, her land, and even, in chemo, when you go through chemo, they have this technology now where you can do these cold hats.
Mhm.
So it saves your hair,
Mhm.
which is pretty, most women will agree. We don't want to lose our hair.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, it's expensive though. That was a $5,000 procedure, to save
Wow.
her hair, but she
Yeah.
was able to use this money
Mhm.
to pay for that. So that's what this is, right? And so for me, when I saw her policy, oh my gosh, and we got it settled and she got the money, I'm like, this is why I do what I do.
Mhm.
This is what this is about. I've seen
Mhm.
families have it and I've seen families not have it.
Mhm.
And so for me, that's, she's doing great. Just texted her today. She's doing good. She just got her test back. There's very minuscule amounts of cancer in her.
Mhm.
So she's doing great.
Okay, that's fantastic. That's a wonderful
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
And I mean, and we kind of talked about this earlier as far as wealth being related to health, but I want to dive a little bit more into that as far as kind of how you view that connection. I mean, personally, when I look at it, I think that there's nothing more beautiful than having your health and also having your financial health, not only like your physical health, mental health, emotional health, but also your financial health. So can you talk a little bit more about kind of how you view that connection between health and wealth?
Yeah, I actually was looking that up, statistically. I'll try and see if I can remember, but there is such a strong connection, and it really goes back to what we were talking about, Daniel, that if I always tell people, start with your health, right? I saw some, speaker, he's some, I can't remember which one. It wasn't Anthony Robbins, but it was somebody like him. He's like, when you have your health, you have 1,000 problems. Right? We're worried about this, we're worried about that. When we don't have our health, we have one problem. And so I cannot stress enough to people, you have got to take care of your health. And especially as women, we tend to put everybody else ahead of us.
Mhm.
And I'm here to please say, Please don't do that. I did that. I was a busy mom, working, all that. I really just can't stress enough. Like we've got to take care of yourself because then you have more to give those you care about.
Mm.
So I do feel there's this like little weird thing in our society, Daniel, where women are kind of expected to give all to everybody else, and that shows them as a good mother, a good wife, all this, right? Whereas really it should be like, hey, you got to take care of yourself so you have more to give. And then we got to talk about what is your wealth, right? Like separate from your partner. And if you're a stay-at-home mom, you need to be setting up these retirement plans. One of the statistics that or a study, I should say, that I read, a bank had sent out, sent out a research to women who were retired and, older women. And they said 99% of these women said they wish they had been more vested in the financials. And I'm like, what happened to that 1%? I don't know what they were thinking. But I mean, really, so these are women who've been through it. They've been through divorce. They've been through, losing a partner. They've been, whatever, life, right? Life happens. And so it's like, we need to make sure that we know where the money's at, what's going on, and be involved in it. Even if you do say, hey, my partner knows more about it, I still want women to go, okay, I need to know where everything is. What are the accounts? But everything that's going on, and make sure they have their own policy separate from having with just their husband. Make sure they have a policy. And also, I always tell people, always make sure you have a policy outside of work. Grab that life insurance policy, Daniel. It's super cheap. Get it, but you want to have something outside of that, because 99% of the time policies will not follow you when you move jobs. And you don't want to be in a situation where you had a health issue and you could no longer get insurance. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I just think that they're so connected. We
definitely
can't have one or the other.
Yeah, definitely. So, Melissa, I have one last question for you, but before I ask it, I want to point people to your website at dandelionwomen.com. Now, last question is, what advice would you give to someone who's starting out in their financial journey, particularly when it comes to protecting their income and also the future with life insurance?
So, again, I'm happy to do a complimentary, have an hour, 45-minute discussion, about kind of what their wishes are, what their goals are. But I really can't stress enough, like, you've got to protect yourself. Even if you're only able to afford $500,000 or, $250,000, somebody young and healthy like yourself, Daniel, you could get $1 million and maybe pay $100 a month. People don't realize that it's very much more affordable than people realize. So you've got to protect yourself in the event that life happens. And then we start slowly, okay, how much can you allocate each month to different investments, right? And we want to make sure we're diversified. I wouldn't, I get people who, they love crypto, Bitcoin, the real estate. I always say we want to be diversified, again, because it's called non-correlated assets. We want to make sure that our assets are not doing the same thing when taxes are high, interest rates are high, stock market's down, stock market's up. We want to make sure it's not going in the same direction.
Got it.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it, Melissa sharing her expertise. So, Melissa, where can people contact you?
I'm happy to answer any questions. You can reach me on my email. Do you want me to give my email?
Yeah.
So it's just Northway, NORTHWAY _Melissa at nlgroupmail.com. Also, you can reach me. My phone number is 949-874-1997. I'm also on LinkedIn and Instagram under Melissa Northway. So really, any way you want to reach out to me. Again, I'm more than happy with any of your listeners, Daniel. I'm so passionate about what I do, and I really, really love helping families and businesses and couples and single people, anybody who's wanting help and support. I'm here to offer that to them.
Awesome. Well, great. Thanks for being on the show, Melissa, and sharing your message.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Daniel. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Beauty Talk podcast. Any questions, please contact the practice directly with the contact information provided during the show. We'll see you again next time. Bye for now.